It's been since February, probably right about now, actually. So we're recording this thing in February 2023. Mm-hmm. I think it's been almost exactly 3 years to the day where I actually coached a client directly.
That's been a while.
I know.
It's been a minute.
We had that thing that came through that shut the world down, and all the gyms, all the evil gyms in the world had to be closed and all that stuff. And there was there was that point where I said, I think this is it for me. I think I'm done coaching clients directly. I have taken on a couple of little projects along the way.
You mean physical training, or you mean nutrition coaching?
I mean nutrition coaching and fitness training, whether it be exercise programming or whatever. I've done some business coaching with some people, so that I'm just talking specifically about on the fitness or the personal trainer side of where I came from in my roots. Took on a couple little projects when there was a couple college athletes that came through on vacation or in transition or whatever, and they stopped through and we got to have some fun there. But I recently sort of made an effort with a friend of mine. I said, okay, man, I'm going to do this with you and I'm going to be committed to it. It's going to be good for me because I am ready to, I'm kind of ready to get back in there and test the waters. And a little of the reason I'd stepped away from it is because I'd been a little discouraged by it at the end. I was like, you know what? I'm just not really feeling this anymore. It's almost boring. I've just been doing it for so long. And when this guy reached out to me, I was like, you know what? This is going to be good. Like, this is going to kind of get me back in it. And immediately I was like,
same frustration.
Fuck, nothing changes, right?
Thing.
It's the same thing, right?
Same game.
But I'm not frustrated by it. I just kind of, like I just did there, is just chuckled about it. And what it really kind of boiled down to is we're a couple months into the year now, we're almost at the end of February here. And people come into the year and they're they're very gung-ho, right, about their fitness program, or at least they feel reinvigorated, remotivated to do whatever it is they're going to do. And they enter in, they get back into their exercise program, try something new, or just uptick what they're already doing, really sort of reevaluate or make some changes to the nutrition program. And they're going. And for those first few weeks, up to 6 weeks, they start to see some pretty good results. They start to feel better, right? The fitness changes. They're losing a little body fat. Their physique is changing a little bit. And then inevitably, it happens very often, about 8 weeks in, things start to slow down. And the frustration, starts to set in a little bit. Like, why aren't I continuing to make the changes that I was making? And that's kind of the conversation I have with this guy the other day. I'm like, well, okay, let's reapproach this a little bit. I'm like, we go through all the basic questions. What are you doing with your nutrition? What are you doing with your fitness right now? Let's talk through that. And he didn't have to get very far into the nutrition conversation. I'm like, hey man, why don't you do this for me? Why don't you just track your food for a few days? And he was not resistant to doing that at all.
That's good.
No, and usually I'm faced with I gotta fucking track my calories. This is so boring. I hate this. Do I really have to do that? I don't want to live that life. I'm like, bro, like, I'm only asking you to track for a couple of days. And that was not his reaction. That's what I used to get in a lot. I know you guys can relate. And it only took about 24 hours. The guy's like, I don't think I'm eating enough. and I had already sort of diagnosed that right from the get-go. I go, yeah, I don't quote unquote think you are either. This is going to be a good learning process. So I think that kind of just maybe sets the stage for this conversation today, in that, they've been doing their thing now for a couple of months. And if they haven't already started to see, if they haven't had a really organized plan or good experience with this process of weight loss and muscle building, which is generally the very common goal, they're going to run into the same things. And that is, after a period of time, you're going to start to see the rate, velocity, and maybe even the trajectory of that weight loss and gains that you've been getting start to flatten out, and sometimes even move the other way. Move the other way may mean gaining some body fat, losing some strength. There's things we need to address. And I wanted to get in that today. Like, how do we avoid that stuff? And if we're already starting, so maybe we haven't started to realize that yet, but how do we avoid those things? If we have started to realize this, how do we self-correct? How do we kind of back up and go, okay, this is a starting point or a stopping point for me to kind of stop and reevaluate, to readjust things. So I want to get into that today, specific on the nutrition end, because I think people do weird shit when they stop losing weight or losing body fat on the nutrition side.
Yeah, they start turning to every trend that they can.
They start to become very emotional about it and freak out.
Well, that goes back to the whole tracking thing. Like as if when I ask you to track and someone, there's this emotional response like, well, it's not that. It's not, no. I don't need to track. Like I don't have to do that. But in this case, like I knew right away that was going to be the issue.
I'm a huge advocate for somebody for tracking, to know the numbers. And you and I, we've had this conversation numerous times. It's like your checkbook, your bank register. I still have a paper bank register. Yeah, he laughs at me. But it's because like, if you want to save money, you've got to know what you have in your bank account, what's your outgoing.
Yeah,
if you want to go on vacation and you want to spend that money, you've got to know what's in your bank account. So if you don't know what your baseline is in your bank account, you can't save money and you're going to constantly be losing money. If you don't know, you don't know.
It's deposits and withdrawals.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I think, when I can push past that resistance of somebody, this is a pain, I don't want to do this, this is an interruption to my day, and then they actually eventually do start tracking, it's extremely enlightening. And they really, people just, they underreport, they overreport, they're very biased in what they believe they're consuming. And then when they actually see it in front of them, or even just the process, the awareness that it takes to even go into an app or whatever the case may be and track it, that gives them that just little extra level of awareness, that little extra time that it takes to think about what they're consuming. And now they really are starting to get a better idea of, oh, wow, I consume way less protein than I realized, or whatever the case may be. Or really, I'm eating that much sugar, or that's adding up that much. It's very enlightening.
It's kind of like the cumulative effect of lack of awareness. Like it starts with like, well, I thought that what I was eating was 6 ounces of protein per meal and my meal prep or whatever that I'm doing at home, because I stopped measuring. And, I went back all of a sudden to recheck in. And I'm like, shit, I'm only putting 5 in, instead of 6. Well, in my 4 servings a day, that's 4 ounces less than I was getting. Multiply that over the course of a week, that's 28 ounces less than I was supposed to be getting.
That or vice versa, right? Adding an extra ounce or half an ounce here or there, it's going to add up at the end. So if you're stalling with your weight loss, I mean, I think taking a period of time and checking in with where your calories are, your macros are, it's important.
Yeah, that awareness piece is just huge. And it's very easy to lose track of that. Even if you're super regimented, Cece and I, we were having this conversation a little bit ago. I know she's kind of gone back to tracking again. And last night we were sitting, it was at the end of the day. She's like, damn, I'm 400 calories under still, and it was like 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And I was like, man, I haven't tracked in a while. I should probably pull back out the tracker. I don't want to make this all about tracking. I think that the word you used there, Stephen, was awareness. And that's what's really important. Like if you're not getting the result that you need, then there's probably something you're unaware of that's happening in there somewhere that with a little extra effort, you could really get your arms around and make some immediate changes. So if you're one of those people, like I said, you're listening to this going, that's not me, I'm doing great. Like I'm down 6 or 7 pounds since the beginning of the year, whatever the case is, I'm feeling great. My endurance is up, my strength is up. Great. Why not get out in front of that right now and just make sure you continue to stay on the right track? If you feel like you got a great plan, then maybe this isn't the right podcast for you. But I think we're probably going to touch on a few other things that may remind you or bring forward like, oh shit, maybe I need to do this and here's why. So it's not all about the tracking, but tracking gives you a very solid platform for understanding the next steps. Again, going back to the bank account analogy, I think that's a really good one. So, what we're really talking about here is recalculating or understanding where your TDEE is, or your total daily energy need, TDEE. I may have added
Expenditure.
I may have
energy expenditure.
Energy expenditure. I may have just added an extra E on there and misspoke. So thanks for that. Total daily energy expenditure. And that changes. That will change over time depending on the demands that you place on your body, or don't place on your body for that matter, and what you may have been doing at the beginning of the year may have changed. And we do these calculations. There's no perfect calculation for this, but there are some good formulas we can use to get a very good estimation, and that's good enough to start. So there are no perfect numbers here, but I think we should talk about TDEE, what makes it up, and get people's heads wrapped around like, why is this important for me to understand? before we get into how many calories that I need. Because if you don't understand what the TDEE is, then you're never, or what yours is for you, or that estimated number is, the calories piece, the macros piece, that conversation can't happen yet. So from a TDEE perspective, what are we talking about?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think what it boils down to is we're talking about energy balance versus calories in, calories out. Yes, if we're looking to lose weight, we do need to be in a calorie deficit, but more accurate is an energy deficit. So it's energy in, energy out versus calories in, calories out. And what TDEE is it basically gives you the idea or an estimate, as you mentioned, of what your daily energy needs are. And that's going to be based first on your basal metabolic rate. And your basal metabolic rate essentially is the baseline amount of calories you need at rest. So that is if you are sitting in a chair all day long, you are still burning calories. Your body is still utilizing energy to keep your heart beating, to keep you breathing, even if your activity levels are essentially zero. So I've seen people who are eating even below their BMR. So they're severely under eating. We're not even factoring in things like non-exercise activity thermogenesis or NEAT, so the calories that you're burning outside of activity.
Working.
Yeah, just going about your daily activities outside of your physical
your exercise.
activity.
Yeah, your exercise routine, so to speak. So you have your exercise activity, and then you have your non-exercise activity. So exercise activity is like the workout that you did on the floor, the run that you did, the bike ride that you did. That's very specific.
Hiking.
Yeah, it's very specific to the exercise piece, but it's not taking into account, things like maybe what your job responsibilities are for the day. A lot of people have heard this, like the mailman or the UPS driver, male person, or the UPS driver is going to have probably a higher, well, let's just say they have a higher non-exercise activity level because they have a little bit more of an active type of job versus the computer coder that's sitting behind the computer all day and goes down to the Google cafeteria for 7 hours and has a cocktail while they're down there and goes back up and does 30 minutes.
Drink some kombucha on tap, play some foosball.
Exactly. So their non-exercise activity is going to be a little bit higher. This is not like, okay, so the UPS driver and the Google coder went to Orange Theory and did the same workout during the same hour at the same time. Those numbers are still going to be different, but that is exercise, not non-exercise. Mm-hmm. And that's important to understand. And there are some kind of, like some estimated factors, X factors we can put in there, variables that we can put in there based on our estimation of what our activity is outside of exercise. Those are, again, they're somewhat arbitrary, but there's some pretty good math and science and let's just say history behind this to understand that they're pretty close, right? But the BMR thing going back, I think what's important for people to understand is that makes up about 75% of the calories that you're going to burn all day long, every day. Mm-hmm. That is a major component.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And the BMR is going to, that's going to shift over time if you are a larger human being in general, a larger frame. If you are building muscle mass, now your basal metabolic rate is most likely going to increase because you are burning more calories and more muscle mass that you have. So that's something that your TDEE as well as your basal metabolic rate can shift over the course of your program. But just to take it back in terms of what I like to start with when I'm working with a client, it's expectations in terms of avoiding or trying to get out ahead of any potential stalls, setting the proper expectations from the beginning. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when you're going to lose a little bit of momentum.
It's not linear.
Yeah, it's going to be non-linear, especially at the beginning of the year. People are very gung-ho. There's something to be said about, quote unquote, newbie gains, or if someone has really, just fresh off the couch and your body is just, you really haven't been doing much, you're probably going to make some pretty rapid progress initially. And then that progress may slow down a little bit. So I always just try to set the expectation that, number one, this is going to be a minimum of a 90-day process, and that's the bare minimum. And more likely, we're looking at 6 months, at 9 months, at a year. If you're trying to I need to lose 30 pounds, it's not going to happen in just a couple of months. So we need to set that expectation beforehand, up front, that, hey, this is going to take some time. There's going to be some lulls. There's going to be some wins. There's going to be some quote unquote losses or periods where things seem to, not be happening as rapidly.
Yeah. So nonlinear, but you're also mentioning like the newbie that jumps off the couch and maybe entered in it with very little to no plan is having some really great results right now. I've been going to the gym. I joined this group class. I'm going 3 or 4 days a week now. I've lost a bunch of weight. My clothes are fitting differently. Everything's good. I had no idea where my TDEE was when I started. And I certainly don't know where it is now, but what I am maybe noticing is, okay, things are starting to slow down for me. I'm not seeing the same result. What has happened? Metabolically, your body's adapting to this. So metabolic adaptation is good. And we're going back to the linear thing and the nonlinear thing. If you've reached a plateau, good. Like that's supposed to happen. Your body is going to do that. So don't think of that as a negative. A metabolic adaptation is important. There's things that we need to take a look at there. But that person that entered into it with no plan at all, not having a baseline and knowing where some of these maybe numbers were or how many calories I was consuming versus how many calories I need, brings us back to the caloric versus the energy deficit. And if you've been losing weight, then you've been in an energy deficit. Your body has needed more calories than you've been providing it, or you've been creating a demand for calories through exercise and your non-exercise activity and your exercise activity, through your BMR. That's created this energy deficit, and your body is going to be burning fuel and fat for a while until it doesn't, and potentially other things in order to nutrients in another way that could be robbing from the tissue you want to maintain, like your lean tissue, to a point where now it's reached a level where it's gotten very comfortable at burning less energy to get the same work done. That is metabolic adaptation. We would typically look at that as like a negative. It's not a negative. It's very natural. It just is what happens. But again, it's generally come up because you're in a energy deficit and you've provided a caloric deficit from the intake side as well as the output side for it to finally reach this point. That might have been repetitive what I just said right there, but I really want to be clear with people that you feel like you're eating enough, but your body needs more energy than you're giving it. And then we're not even going to get into the macronutrient profile side of things. You've now reached a time where your body's just going to keep doing what it's doing, and you should expect
for your body to adapt.
For your body to adapt.
Doing.
Yeah, it's going to stop. It's going to stop seeing gains. So we have to recalculate, or we have to recalibrate to make sure we're on the right path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, the way I try to explain this, as far as if you are hanging out in an energy deficit for too long, how your body will eventually adapt, is we need to keep in mind that even though we're in a completely modern society, our bodies biologically still function in a fairly primitive fashion. And say in the caveman and woman days,
well done.
Food was seasonal, and the availability of food was seasonal. So in the winter, when food was less available, the body goes into a conservation mode. Your body is going to conserve body fat, because body fat is essentially just stored energy that your body is then going to use to keep you alive when food is scarce during the winter or during the lean months. Our bodies don't know the difference between a famine and us just severely restricting calories in today's modern day. So when you are restricting calories significantly over an extended period of time, what's going to happen is your body is going to adapt to utilizing what you are giving it, and it's going to try to be as efficient as possible with the minimal amount of energy that it is receiving. And again, your body doesn't know the difference between you're just restricting food and food is not available. So at that point in time, when your body goes into a conservation mode, your weight loss is going to plateau. Your body is going to hang on to that body fat because it thinks, okay, we need this. We need to store this because there's a lack of food and we need to we need to stretch this more or less.
Yeah, again, it's very natural and it's a good thing. That's what our bodies are really good at doing. And so going just without beating up the TDEE too much, making that calculation is not hard to do. There are a lot of, you could go out on the internet, there's formulas there to do it. Sometimes it can be a little bit confusing, and I've seen some that are not very accurate. So it's important that that you get one that let's just say is tried and true, and that you use the same one continuously, so you've got some consistency to it so that you're not jumping around in the spectrum here, because there is a little bit of a spectrum with these formulas. Another way I see people trying to calculate this is using like these diet trackers or nutrition trackers that will make some calculations for you. You start putting in your height, weight, age, gender, how much weight do you want to lose in a certain period of time, and it will calculate out this number for you, right? And oftentimes that formula is lacking some specifics, like, again, this exercise variable or activity variable based on your lifestyle. It doesn't necessarily account for your body fat percentage. These are things that we can start to add in to sort of tighten up this formula. But the worst things that I've seen these things do is they start to play games, because most of these the app will play games, because most of these trackers will start to offset the calories that you're eating against the calories that you're expending through exercise. So you've seen this, like it'll tell you how many calories you have left over for the day based on the activity that the app has calculated for you, whether you're hooked up to like some type of wearable device or it's what you're inputting into the app. I think it's very dangerous because there's zero consistency to any of that usually, and those formulas calculating exercise activity based on height, sex, and age are way off.
Super inaccurate.
Yeah. Way off. So in some cases, these apps allow you to turn that off, and I would always encourage people to turn that off. So this comes to the tracking piece as we move away from TDEE. But we will provide a cool formula and an easy formula for that at the end of the show that people can go to. We'll give them you can go to our website. There'll be a document there, and it'll kind of walk you through this process so you can figure that out. But the next most important thing is understanding what you're currently consuming and how much. That goes back to how I started this. Like, let's track for a couple of days. And this doesn't mean forever, but this is a check-in. It would be the same as you tracking, again, your checkbook or your bank account or the loads or the weights or the times or whatever that you're doing for the WOD for the day or whatever in your workouts. It's exactly the same. And I think that where people have the hardest time about it is like, this just seems so tedious. Anything you start, if you've never done it before, is going to feel a little bit like that as you're kind of figuring it out. But I think with technology now, like as easy as this is, there's so many ways to do this, whether it's like through a MyFitnessPal or something like that, which I like because that just seems to be kind of the easiest one for people to use. I know there's a million of them. I just like that one because it seems to give the greatest visibility and the most depth with regard to, you can start break down, how many macros, your percentages, your micronutrients, even those kinds of things are all kind of tied up in there.
And you can log, if you're eating something similar, you can create an entry, and then all you do is just re-upload that same entry. So you don't have to re-enter. You don't have to track every single meal if you're eating something similar. You can just plug it back in. It's not that time consuming.
Yeah, and you don't have to do it forever. Do it for a few days.
Just to reevaluate.
Just to kind of see where you're at. Yeah, and I think one of the things that's important when you're doing that, this is just a tip for people, don't just don't wake up don't go to bed on Sunday after the Super Bowl with the hangover and go, okay, I'm going to start this tomorrow, right? And then, you track Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday and feel like you have a solid number, but damn well, the Warriors game is on Friday night and you're going to be out drinking again and you're going to be out eating like an asshole at the bar or whatever else. Like track for a period of time, which really gives you a solid look at what you're really doing throughout the week, because this is cumulative. You may eat really clean Monday through Wednesday, and then Thursday it starts to fall apart a little bit at happy hour. Friday, maybe you're way under calories because you're, whatever's going on at work or whatever. And then Saturday comes and Sunday comes and you're eating double the calories that you were eating over the previous 2 or 3 days. What we need to see is an average over time so that we have a really good look at, again, the amount of food or the amount of calories we're putting in, as well as the makeup of those calories. Steven, I don't know if you have any like suggestions around that.
Well, yeah, I mean, though, you have to maybe toss out some of those outliers that kind of skew your average. So it would be a good idea to track during a period where, sort of a typical week for you versus if some holidays are going on, if a birthday is going on. I mean, those things are going to come up, but I guess you have to try to evaluate, if this was really out of character, or, you're at a wedding and you had a bunch of food that you don't usually eat, you drank a lot, and that's going to throw off your total average and really skew the data from the rest of the week. So there's something to keep in mind, that these outliers are there.
Yeah, and that you got to be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
Right? You have to be honest with yourself when you are doing the tracking. So, okay, so I've calculated my TDEE and I've tracked, so I know what my calories are. Now what the hell do I do? So there's a couple different scenarios. One, you're eating at what we'll call your maintenance, right? And your maintenance being, this is how many calories I should be eating to maintain where I am, right? 2, you could be eating over, right? And 3, you could be eating under. Really, those are your three options. There's not really any other in-betweens there. So if I'm looking to continue my weight loss, but I'm under my TDEE, what should I do?
So the idea is going to be sort of you could call it a refeed, you could call it a reverse diet or a recovery diet. That depends on, how periodized, how planned out.
How you came into it.
Yeah, how you began your plan. A reverse diet is going to be more of a gradual reintroduction of calories, versus a recovery diet is going to be a little bit of a faster track. So if I had to kind of prescribe, most people tend to fall into the category of a reverse diet, whereas a recovery diet might be more so for someone who is, for example, in a physique competition or something like that.
Yeah, I think a good way for people to look at this is kind of the way I put it. Like, you were either planned or you were not planned. Yeah. So if you're that person that came into the front of the year with nothing but, just piss and vinegar, and you were just going for it, and you felt like you had some self-discipline behind you and you stopped drinking a little bit, that's great, but that's not well planned. All right. So versus the person that came into the beginning of the year, understanding what their TDEE was, understanding what their macro numbers are, understanding how they may be cycling calories and cycling macros throughout the weeks and the months in order to get to a specific point, understanding that they were going to be working towards a caloric deficit and at some point would need to return to maintenance. If you didn't do that work, then what you're going to be doing is a reverse diet, right? If you did do that work, you're going to be doing what we call a recovery diet. And so that's the way to kind of look at it. The recovery diet is a planned return based on a planned going into a deficit, and a reverse diet is somebody that would be somebody that was like under their caloric maintenance, or let's just say in a deficit for, let's say, weeks to maybe a couple of months. That person that was in that deficit or severely under eating for months to years, that person needs to be on a recovery diet. And that's where you're going, like, that's the depends piece. Like, it depends on those, basically whatever you categorize yourself there, that will dictate the type of diet or reverse or recovery diet you'll be going into.
I think when you meant a reverse diet for someone who's been under eating, significantly under eating.
Did I mess that out? Mm-hmm. Oh, fuck me. So, yeah, reverse diet, months to years would be on a reverse diet, and weeks to months would be somebody on a recovery diet. So just to be clear, my apologies. So how do we do that, right? So and what are the differences? So what's the difference between like a recovery and a reverse diet with regard to, let's say, putting calories back in to achieve caloric maintenance or above?
The reverse diet, as we mentioned, is going to be a little more of a gradual reintroduction, versus the recovery diet might be a shorter and more rapid reintroduction of calories. So for someone who's on a reverse diet, maybe something like introducing maybe 50 to 100 calories extra per week. So that can be broken down into per day, 20, 25 extra calories per day. And then we're going to gradually increase week by week over a period of maybe, up to 6 to 8 weeks, versus a recovery diet might be as short as a couple of weeks and a more rapid reintroduction of calories, 200, 300 calories a week, something like that.
Yeah. So things to be aware of. One, the gradual is in an effort to, there's a few things there. If you're finding, let's just say your caloric maintenance is you've done the calculation, you figured out it's 2,000 calories, but you're only eating 1,000 calories. To try to put in 1,000 calories to come back to you, it would be, that's abusive to your body. I mean, first off, you may be able to do that on 1 or 2 days, but your body is not going to receive that very well,
You're
right?
not going to be able to sustain
I was going to say, yeah.
Probably not.
Gastrointestinally.
Yep.
And
yeah. And the other part about it is your body is not at a point now where it has upregulated to deal with that increased expenditure increased intake, and it's likely that your body will store that or want to store that as fat tissue, which is the opposite of what you're trying to do. So we're doing this in a very gradual basis. Now, you said it could be 6 to 8 weeks. This is going to be dependent on how far or how deep you are into that deficit, or how far you are behind with regard to your total daily needs. So, it could be longer. If you're way under, again, if you're supposed to be at 2,500 and you're sitting at around 1,000 with your daily intake now, this could take months.
And yeah, you've done quite a number on your metabolism. It's going to take some time. I think that it always comes back to setting the expectation that these things are going to take time. It's not going to happen just like that.
Yeah, so you want to do this slowly over time, and then on the recovery diet, this is somebody whose body's probably going to be a little bit more responsive to the additional calories. We're probably really going to like these calories. The pitfalls of putting too much in too fast are a bit, again, when I say pitfalls, it's not necessarily a negative thing, particularly if you're on a recovery diet, that you're going to be putting on some body fat. It's just at what rate are you going to be putting it on? So, you can stretch the recovery diet a little longer if you wanted to maybe minimize how much body fat you're putting back on. It's just that it's going to take you that much longer to get back to maintenance. So performance might suffer a little bit. You might not be feeling as great as soon than if you took it a little faster. But in both cases, again, we're going back to our presenting things in triplicates here. One of 3 things is going to happen, right? So if I'm on this reverse diet right now, I recognize, I am way under eating, right? And I start to put these calories back in. One of 3 things basically can happen. One is you start putting these calories back in, you feel fucking fantastic, right? I
have energy now.
You got energy now. You go to bed at night and your head hits the pillow and you sleep and your performance starts to go up and you're starting to notice your clothes are feeling a little different. You're actually losing a little body weight as you're maybe putting on a little bit of muscle. That can happen, right? That can happen. And you're on the right track. Everything, keep doing that, right? And recheck in. Here's what else can happen. You can feel really great. Your performance can go up, right? The head hits the pillow at night and you go to sleep and everything's great. However, the weight is not changing on the scale, right? You're maintaining the same amount of weight. But all the other factors, including your biofeedback, that being how good you feel, not just what you can measure in terms of performance, is good. You're just not maybe losing any weight or dropping any body fat on the scale. That's another thing that can happen. And the third thing that can happen is you can actually have all of those things and still put on a little bit of body fat. That is very possible, right? That is very possible. So those are the impacts or the expected results that you should have. There are adjustments that can be made based on where you maybe fall into those categories. But when you're on this type of thing, that's going to happen. Same with the recovery diet. The person that's on the recovery diet might have a little bit more insight to what they should or shouldn't do in order to mitigate some of those, maybe the unwanted impacts. But the metabolism of your body is your body, and it's going to respond or in whatever way it needs to or wants to, whether you like it or not. So, but it's important, going back to expectations, that you understand what this process could look like.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Where do we go from here?
So I think from there, so now we've talked about what to do. The next thing is or how to do it in terms of putting calories back in. So it may be like, again, like you said, more like 100, 50 to 100 calories a week. For the reverse diet person, it may be closer to 200 calories to 300 calories a week on the recovery diet person, depending on who you are and what direction you're coming at. But that's something to think about. So we're looking at it from the nutrition aspect. Those are things that you should be planning on somewhere in your plan, no matter how dialed in or not dialed in you may be. So think about that. But again, there's people and they do some really wacky shit when they're not seeing the results they want to do. And a lot of times what they do is like, well, I'll just exercise more, right? So I think we have to talk about the energy expenditure piece and how to manage that a little bit during this time as well, because we're trying to get back to maintenance, right? And when you tell people you need to be eating more, I don't know. My experience with that, sometimes it can be met with a lot of resistance. A lot of resistance.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something that it happens often where if the weight loss is stalling or we're no longer getting the results that we were getting initially, let's cut more calories. Let's exercise even more. I need to push my body even further and eat even less. Push my body even further, eat even less. And what actually ends up happening is now we're getting deeper and deeper into a recovery deficit. And now we're going in the wrong direction. It's going to be counterproductive now. You're basically forcing your body into even greater an emergency mode. Your body is already under the strain of the energy deficit because you are under-consuming calories, under-consuming energy. So that already is putting strain on your body. And now we're going to throw on top of that gasoline onto the fire, pushing your body further physically in your workouts. And now, that can lead to chronically elevated cortisol. That can interfere with your sleep. That can now start interfering with hormones. And again, is not conducive to losing body fat. Your body goes into the conservation mode.
Yeah, this is where we've talked about in the past, where less is more.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Less is more. So, the goal is to maintain lean muscle mass, if not gain lean muscle mass, right? To help you eventually get into what's the word I'm looking for? Increase your basal metabolic rate so that you have the ability to then go into a deficit later. So if you're doing a bunch of cardio, cut the cardio out. Keep with your resistance training. So you're working on maintaining, if not building, lean muscle mass, while at the same time you're working on getting your energy back up with feeding yourself more calories to get to maintenance.
Yeah, so there's the component of, we've talked about metabolic adaptation. There's also a neuromuscular adaptation that's happening through this process, and I'll come back to that in a second. But yeah, it's about adjusting the caloric outputs while you're also adjusting the caloric inputs. And that can be very, very tough for people to get there or wrap their heads around. I cannot tell you how many, it's almost like a heated conversation where you're just pulling back and the person on the other end of the conversation is just getting fully emotional about the fact that you're telling them you need to stop working out 6 days a week.
Quit doing high intensity interval training.
I didn't say stop moving, stop exercising, just stop killing yourself 6 days a week. And maybe we take a little bit of a different approach. Maybe you need a little bit more yoga in your life, maybe a little bit less running or cycling class or whatever in your life, a little bit more resistance training, those types of things. Maybe you need, a hike or two a week rather than,
some active recovery.
Yeah.
Exactly. Down-regulate a little bit.
Yeah. So it's dialing back on, obviously, on the energy expenditure, and that could really fuck with somebody's head too, right? They're just going, wait, you're telling me to do less? Like it sounds
eat more and work out less.
It sounds so
counterintuitive.
So counterintuitive. And so going back to the awareness piece and the setting expectations, I think this is really important for individuals, and we're talking about it from a coach's perspective, but the expectation with yourself. And the reality of it is that the body is an amazingly adaptive machine. It will do a lot of cool stuff. But you talked about going deeper into the recovery debt. You can exercise more and you could even eat less. And guess what? You'll probably lose a little bit more weight. But what happens when you reach the absolute bottom? And we see that happen all the time. You mentioned
your body thinks you're starving.
1000%. And you were just saying like you talk to people or work with people, and I've done this for years. They're eating below their basal metabolic rate, the basic amount of calories it takes for them to basically sustain themselves throughout the day. What do you do when you're there? There's no place left to go. There's no place left to go. There's no supplement. There's no nothing. Maybe there is to give you that extra, 1 pound loss or whatever, but eventually you are going to hit rock bottom, and you're going to need to unfuck yourself out of this situation. I've had people come in and they go like, well, I'm going to Mexico in 2 months and I need to lose weight. I'm like, but you are so far below your caloric maintenance right now. Us doing this is going to do, you wound up in this situation because you were exercising too much and not eating appropriately for the demands that your body has. Yeah, but I am going to do this anyway. Okay, we can do this. I can tell you that just means we can diet you down, right? We can continue to reverse calories or increase exercise expenditure, caloric expenditure there. But that just means it's going to be that much harder, and you're going to need to work with me that much longer to come out the other side. Yeah, you might look good in your Instagram pictures, but yeah, it's going to be a 6-month recovery period. What's crazy to me is how many times I've heard, okay, sounds good. How much does that cost? It's right into that. So, hey, look, if that's what you want to do, it's America. Do whatever the fuck you want, man. Yeah. But the point of this is you will wind up there, and some of the things, I don't want to say damage. I'm trying to scare people, but the situation you put yourself in there, you may be going down a path that is way harder than I'm even anticipating that it's going to be in this conversation when we start to talk about what you're doing to yourself metabolically and hormonally. But let's go back I want to go back real quick to the neurological adaptation piece, because if you were that newbie jumping off the couch, to your point, Stephen, at the beginning, you're going to see some really cool stuff happen really quickly. I love working with new clients because they come in and like in 2 weeks' time, they're like, whoa, this 10-pound really dumbbell. Good. That 10-pound dumbbell felt like 100 pounds, 2 weeks ago, and now it's super light. Yeah, it's physiology. This is what happens when we apply the stuff. But over that 2-month period, your body's also neurologically adapting, right? Your body's adapting to the exercise that you're doing. And so if you've been on a program that is, again, primarily, you were mentioning this about the cardio and how much cardio people put in. If it's primarily been dependent on cardio, any neurological adaptation after about 2 months can be gone, right? Unless you are pushing yourself, progressing in an intensity perspective, to a very, very high rate. And when I say high rate, I mean you've started to add things in that really challenge your muscular system as well as the fuel systems that you're using in order to get through that exercise. And so but even then, that you get to a point where you don't have a return. Right. So here's this, like, people go, well, I'll just do HIIT training. That's exactly what we're talking about not doing. Don't do that, because that is not what you want to. That's not what you want in the long term. That's what you want to use very rarely in order to uptick the caloric expenditure, or maybe even break through, a little bit of a plateau if you're trying to lose those last couple extra pounds or whatever. And you want to do it in, again, be more efficient with your time. You could do less of it and get a pretty big impact out of it. This is what sort of drove a little bit of this conversation today. The weather cleared up here like the other day, and we got, it was gorgeous outside. We pay high dollars to live here in California, and we demand that we get our good weather on occasion. Sunny February, yeah. Oh, it's fucking great. I want 65 degrees. Yep. So. Got on the bicycles and, threw on the zoot suit and whatever, and we're like, let's go riding. And we wound up on one of the park trails. And I knew there was going to be traffic out there because it was gorgeous. So I knew there'd be a lot of people out there, just period. Dogs and families and whatever else. And goddamn, the running. Right. So the running always gets me. And just maybe something you could speak to, Stephen, since you do so much of it. The suffering that I see people doing out on the trail and the running that they're doing. And look, more power to you. If that's what makes you feel good and that's what you want to do, go ahead. But I'm watching people, and I always, in the back of my mind, I'm like, why are you doing that? That looks like it hurts. Yes, exactly. It has to hurt. Yeah. It's just the cadence, the efficiency is like one leg is longer than the other one, and it's like it's awful. Like that looks like it sucks. I mean, it's like people that spend time around, biomechanics or whatever, you're looking at some of the stuff that is happening out there, you're just going, holy God. Like I said, the body is an amazing adaptive machine. The fact that it will keep going under some of these circumstances is crazy to me, but I'm watching people doing it and I'm going, how long have you been doing this for? Like, did you just start this at the beginning of the year and, you're just continuing down your path here with very, sort of poor base to get going with? And now what I'm seeing is a result of 2 months. Again, we're going back to the new year. I'm seeing this 2 months of what's happened to you. So maybe you've lost 10 pounds and you feel great. And that's great. Weight loss is good. Fat loss is good, right? From a risk factor perspective. But what is the long-term result going to be of what you're doing? And do you have alternatives? So this is what I'm bringing in. Like, I'm sort of making fun of the running mechanics that we're seeing out there, but it's bringing variety to your program, right? So if you're 2 months into your program, you're doing the same things you were doing 2 months ago, don't expect to see a lot of change. You're neuromuscularly adapting to those types of, to whatever the movements, to whatever the activity is. And it may be time to increase your activity a little bit or increase the intensity of that activity a little bit. And you need to make sure, going back to the intake piece on the nutritional support side, you are giving your body enough calories to support that new activity. So if you're trying to continue to get a good fitness result as well as a weight loss result here, you might need to eat more than you were eating at the beginning of this whole thing.
God forbid.
Yeah, which is another mind-blowing thing for a lot of people to kind of wrap their head around. But in the end, as we're circling this all the way back, it really comes down to the awareness piece again. How many calories should I be eating? What am I currently doing? How am I organizing myself around this? And there's some simple things you can do. One, calculate your TDEE. It's simple. We're going to give you a formula. At the end of this, you can go there. You can see it. We'll have the chart there. You can just follow along, basically fill in the blanks, right? And we'll actually give you a demonstration video on how to calculate it if it's not making sense for all you math wizards out there, right? We'll put a video in there. The second thing is to understand how many calories you're currently intaking, right? So let's start tracking. There's lots of ways to do that. Again, there's a ton of apps out there. We use MyFitnessPal a lot because it's something we're familiar with and we find it super user-friendly. And it connects with our custom app that we have for our clients and our members here, so we can see what they're doing in their own MyFitnessPal. It integrates, so we like that one. Use whatever you want, but track your calories and your macros and find out where you currently are.
At least to get a baseline.
Get a baseline, yeah. Get it and reevaluate where your baseline is, and then figure out where do I need to be? Like if I'm, where's my maintenance and where am I currently? If I'm above and I'm overeating, then hey, maybe I need to start cutting back. What's a reasonable amount of calories to cut, or in terms of trying to achieve that deficit? 300. It's probably pretty manageable for most people. 300 calories over the course of a day, or per day is probably a good place to start. You could probably go as many as 500.
It's about max.
Yeah, that's. I'm not going to say it's aggressive. I'm going to say, why don't you start with 300 and see what happens there, and you can always pull back a little bit more. I would much prefer that for my clients than going too deep into that deficit and going, oh shit, we overdid it, and have some of these unwanted impacts start to show up.
The energy levels sinking, and it's just unsustainable.
Yeah,
which could lead to binging later.
Right. So if we have to move it backwards a little bit, then that's a way to do it. Think 300 to 500 calories beyond where you currently are, and we want to go below maintenance, no more than about 300 to 500 calories below maintenance ultimately. But if you're eating 1,000 calories over your current maintenance, right? Don't try and cut out 1,300 to 1,500 calories right now. Going back to the word sustainable, very unsustainable, and you're going to be an asshole. So don't do that either. Just start to cut it back a little bit. And you should start to see the impacts of that fairly quickly, right? But keeping in mind that your body is going to adapt. So when you get metabolically adapt, so when you get into that deficit, staying there for a long period of time is not a good idea. Let's say somewhere between 4 to 6 weeks is a good place to maybe hang out in there. But understand that you may not see, go back to the word linear, you may not see continued weight loss for 4 to 6 weeks, right? Maybe a little bit weight loss. Then it kind of sits for a little bit, and then it goes down a little bit, and then it actually may go up a little bit, and then it goes back down a little bit. So that's not a linear thing either.
Yeah, for a lot of people, what we're doing, especially if you've been yo-yo dieting for an extended period of time, a lot of what we're doing initially is just rehabbing your metabolism, because unfortunately you've been moving a little bit in the wrong direction, or maybe just misguided in your efforts, earnest as they may be. So we're just trying to, rehabilitate, get things back to functioning. Get back to homeostasis, function a little bit more properly.
Yeah. So if you find yourself you're way under, that's a little bit more of a challenge I've found for most people, just psychologically. And then also like physically getting in the food to kind of put it in there. Don't go reaching for powders and pills. You need to be eating food and start to add maybe 50 calories in a day over time, 50 to 100. Again, that's not a lot of calories. I mean, if I looked at an apple, a large apple could be as much as 100 calories, maybe even less. So it's not like you're adding a ton of food, but starting to add that in, it's going to be a practice. You're not going to be perfect every day.
Incremental changes that you can execute consistently.
And bring that up, and then keep an eye on it. Continue to track, while you're doing that too, just to make sure you're staying on. Don't make assumptions. Those are easy things to do. The other thing I think, the last thing I would say is for people to wrap their head around is understanding that this type of thing, or the concepts that we're talking about, everybody deals with. I don't care if you have how dialed in you are with your nutrition, how dialed in you are with your exercise. Metabolic adaptation, neurological adaptation, caloric maintenance phases, being above maintenance, being below maintenance is all part of the process. And if you thought about it that way, going, I just want to be organized and making sure I'm cycling through and in and out of these things effectively to meet my goals, meet my needs, also be healthier, feel healthier, that is part of your nutrition planning. That should be part of your nutrition exercise planning game. So there's another concept we talk about called the periodization of your nutrition, which is much like the periodization of your training plan. And if you're periodizing your training plan, then you damn well should be periodizing your nutrition plan in order to support that. So if you're that person that's like, I got my shit dialed in, but you're not periodizing your nutrition, you should be thinking about that, because I guarantee you're not seeing the results that you want to see.
You want them in sync.
Yeah, you got to have them in sync.
It just makes sense.
Yeah. So we're going to provide some stuff for you. If you go to rdfguides.com, you're going to see a PDF there where we will give you sort of the shortcuts to some of this stuff. It's part of a bigger program that we have called Fuel You. You may have heard us talk about this on the program before. It's our nutrition success program that we give people. It's a personalized approach to getting your arms around your own nutrition. We talk about all of this stuff that we just talked about today. This was just kind of some snippets of it. Fuel You is like a 30-day program. It doesn't have to be done in 30 days. You can totally choose your own adventure here and go as short or as long as you want with it. But we find like if those people that make like a commitment to getting it done inside a 30-day period have the most success with it. It's supported with the stuff that you're going to see when you go and download that PDF, which will have the links to some of the videos that are locked inside that program we wanted to share with you. So you'll see that. There's a what we'll call a student workbook. So there's some practical application that supports the video tutorials that we provide along the way. And you'll also get access to our team here to help you through it if you whatever questions you might have. But again, it really, when we call it Fuel You, because we start off with like talking about a little bit of the history and getting you to understand your own history from a health and fitness and diet perspective. Maybe recall some things and kind of write some things down and understand, where have I been? Because if I don't know where I've been, how do I know where I'm going? Then we get into the math, which we talked a lot about today. We'll get into more details, like I said, within the program, but also in that PDF. Then we talk about science. We get deeper into the macros, and that, to Stephen's point, not all calories are created equal. And we're talking about caloric deficits versus energy deficits and expenditures. We talk about that a little bit, and I think in terms that people can really understand it. No matter where you are sort of on the spectrum of your nutrition or exercise knowledge. And ultimately we get into kind of the psychology piece of, how to create momentum and continue the momentum down the line. But that also comes with that awareness that we talked about before, and things like understanding metabolic adaptation and understanding nutritional periodization. And by the time you're done, you've sort of mapped out your own plan. It's not us telling you what to do. There are no like prescriptions here. We don't subscribe to any dogma, no specific diet. Look, if you're carnivore, you can Fuel U is great for you. If you're vegan, Fuel U is great for you. And anywhere in between, whether you're an athlete who's just looking to get your arms around things a little bit more, or you're a total noob, you don't get any of this. I think those that come into it with a little bit of history of maybe doing some tracking and reading and like to problem solve, on their own, that like direction, like a roadmap, but they like to problem solve. They like to hear the whys, but they also want to be challenged with, how do I figure this out for myself? And Fuel U is a perfect program. So you'll see kind of a sneak peek to that. But the PDF is free. And when you go to the PDF and you look at the PDF there, with the links and the other info that we'll give you there, we'll also put in a code for 50% off our Fuel U program. So when you do that, when you go there and you download it, and maybe you want to go a few steps deeper, maybe do that and get 50% off when you make your purchase.
That's awesome.
Why not?